And what about going swimming with the school? Was that quite a regular?
Oh yes,
Yes.
I suppose we'd be about 8, I think, when we started with school. Because I can't remember going from the infant school from round in Mornington Street. Yes, I think I'd say we started about 8 and we crocodiled then. And that was when we had, I don't know whether they were the Gaskell sisters or whether it was mother and daughter. But it was the 2 Gaskell ladies
who
taught us to swim. Right. Yes, and they used to walk down, you know, you'd done your breath, you used to go from the 6 foot.
So you're saying you were walking from school?
Yes.
And which school was that?
St Stephen's.
St Stephen's School.
Yes.
And you would go quite regularly?
On a weekly basis, as far it seemed weekly to me. It might have been once a month, I don't know, you know, on reflection, but it was certainly on a weekly basis.
And would you go right through the year, summer and winter?
Yes, it was cold weather as well, because we used to be frozen, because we used to go back, and then when we went back, it wasn't the last lesson, we used to go back to school.
And do you remember any particular, was it different routine going with the school, or?
No, except there was only our own schooling. We didn't share the bath with the school. And the same thing then, we always went with our swimming costumes so that we were in first. And the lessons were exactly the same, going across the bed first from the steps, walking down the steps and putting your face in the water and holding the side and pushing on the side with your hand and working your legs and things. The routine was just the same.
Would you have gone with the school, do you know?
Or no, I didn't go with the school. They did go, but I didn't go with. I never went with the school. It wouldn't be before I was 8 or 9, I shouldn't think. And anyway, and I think I must have. Done most of my learning in Victoria Baths. I'm not dead sure, but anyway. But I know that the final when I finally learnt to strike out, it was in an indoor baths in Morecambe. That was of course that was that was closed down during the war and never used as a baths again. It was in a hotel, and it was the space was being used for something else. A pity. It was very nice then. And and then after that, of course, we were only on holiday in Morecambe for a fortnight, of course, in the summer. So of course, after that, it was Victoria.
So were a lot of the galas into school galas? Because there were also quite a few swimming clubs
they were
in
into
Manchester.
schools, weren't they? It was into school galas.
Not ours,
Was you your own school? Yes.
Your own school gala.
But you put teams into schools, didn't you?
Yeah. Yes, they competed against other schools, yes. Yeah. But we had our own school gala at High Street.
And that would be, so you'd have races for the different age children?
Different age groups, yes. Mm-hmm. Different events, different styles and different age groups.
Did the school have its own prizes, trophies that it gave out?
Did they have?
With the trophies or prizes?
Your own yes.
Yeah, trophies, yes. Prizes, yes.
So can you tell me about the Water Babies, what that was?
It was a group of us. We would only be from 5 up to, what would we be then? About 10 or 11. And we would sort of do fancy swimming. When I say fancy, more exhibition of circles and sort of all changing places. And we did one in particular, it's just coming back to mind, and it was called the Wheel. And there'd be so many of you lay on your back, head to toe, and then there'd be 2 would swim and would push the wheel round. you see. So, and from the high, say from the balcony, you were looking down on this. But you would sort of go ahead and then a foot, and a head and a foot alternate and form a circle, and your feet would be astride, so that the girl, and then there'd be one at one side of the wheel and one at the other, and they'd swim swim and turn the wheel round, and then you would, the ones with they'd be on the outside, and the ones that had the feet on to the centre would then kick the legs and form the splashing, so you get like this fountain in the centre. It was all very nice. Yes, that's just one.
Did you say something about the competitions then that you went in as you got a bit older? Because you mentioned about swimming for the city. Were these galas mostly held at Victoria Baths?
They were held at Victoria Baths, yes. There were a lot of galas in those days, and a lot of them were based on times. Lots of prizes and lots of events. They were always very happy occasions, really, and then they were often followed by hot pots and things like that, you know, which were have they got kitchens down in the cellars at Victoria Baths?
Well, I've seen a reference to a kitchen in a book, but I can't work out where it would have been. So I wonder if you remember that, where you would have
I
gone
don't
for
remember
the
where it
refreshments.
was, but I remember that these ladies were always making hot pots down steps, so there must have been a kitchen there.
And would you go downstairs to eat?
I think we must have done, because I can't think where there was anywhere.
Have you ever been in the Turkish bath yourself, or do you just remember your
No,
parents?
never.
But you said your dad used to go in.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything he said about it?
Well, I used to enjoy it, that he felt especially clean after it, because he used to, the odd time, and treat himself, he'd go to Harriet's.
Harrogate?
Harriet's.
Whereabouts is that?
You know, the Opera House.
Oh, yeah.
A big white sunlight house. There was a Turkish bath there. Harriet's.
Or we'd sometimes go to the High Street bath.
High Street, yeah.
Did you ever use the Russian and Turkish baths?
No, I would wanted to. I used to say, would love to go and have a Turkish bath, you know, but everybody used to say, oh, you don't want to go to a Turkish bath. Whether there was a stigma attached to them or not, I don't know.
Yeah,
no, I understand the people.
You don't know why they said you don't want to go and use them?
Well, I think it was because whether in the background there was something not nice about them or something like that, I don't know. But I was never encouraged. And perhaps I didn't have the money to go in, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was only young.
Right. Okay.
12. I went to Victoria Baths on the first Sunday, I couldn't give you the date, when they allowed mixed bathing. And all the photographers were outside because it was a terrible thing, men and women going in the water together.
You were a child then?
Pardon?
This is when you were
Well,
a child?
yeah, well, not very old, you know, yeah, about 14, yeah. But, it was, there were terrible people going in for a swim together.
So that attracted quite a bit of publicity,
Yeah,
did it?
yeah, oh yeah, all the press was there, yeah.
And was that the first baths in Manchester, do you know, where they did mixed bathing?
I think it was. I think it was the only place with 3 pools. So they still had one for boys and girls, and they had a big one for the mixed. I think it was a Sunday when it opened, you know, that big pool, yeah.
I just remember something else I wanted to ask you. You remember the diving platforms?
Yes.
And that's in the mixed pool?
That was in the mixed pool. There was just one very small, sort of like a long plank, and it had like a webbing over it.
So which pool are we talking about now?
In the ladies only, the third class. The third class. There was a narrow board. There was like a diving, but it was only, say, 2 steps off the surface. It just got you over into the water, over the edge of the bath.
Springing?
Yes.
Springboard.
It was be a springboard. But the
can you describe the diving platform in the
first class? That had steps on each side, I think. It went up either side. and it was a high board. There would be, I don't know how many steps went up, can't recall now.
We've got the photo here, which I assume
yes.
is the original one. Did it look like that when you remember the pool?
Yes, but it seemed higher than that.
But then you were smaller.
Yes, of course. Seemed much
And
higher.
this is a slide down the middle, is it?
No, it wasn't like that. It was straight.
You might have seen a difference.
It was straight across, like, you know, a straight. I thought I was looking at it sort of on an angle. No, it didn't slide. It was definite more steps here, and the board came straight out.
Okay.
Straight out, and you sort of came to the edge. And I remember there's like a very coarse, ropey, so you didn't slip on it.
And was it springy?
Yes, that was springy. Yes.
And would you just dive off the one level?
Yes, there was just I think there was I think that was the only one there. There might have been a very low one, but I don't recall that. But I remember the high one because I learnt to dive off there. I hadn't got to the sort of somersaulting off. I was just starting that when I fell in. I slipped and hit the water on my chest, and that put paid to it for a little while.
There was a civilian swimming instructor named Mr. George, and he was there. He was there when the ACC was there. He was there when I was there with my father, and he was very active. He was very active. He was showing us how to. He was showing each one of us individually how to. The best way to do the breaststroke is to bring your hands to well down, not to your chin. You see, if you bring your hands to your chin, you can keep your nose an inch out of the water all the time. But if there's a lot of splashing, you might never get a chance to breathe. Whereas if you do it with your hands well down, it brings your head out, well above the water, and then when you shoot out, of course, your head goes under, your nose goes under. But at least when you're well out of the water, you've got some chance to breathe. Anyway, so he was. Anyway, when all this time, every night that you went in, there was an American soldier. He was going from one end of the bath to the other continuously, doing the crawl, you know, making an awful splash, and this went on all the time. And of course, you know that we used to make fun of American soldiers. They all seemed to have big bottoms, didn't they? Well, they did. And anyway, this man only had normal size, but he seemed, the way he swam, he seemed to have his bottom stuck up out of the water, you know, which wasn't very good for streamlining and making a hell of a splash. And one evening, Mr. George was there, and I said something, and he said, "He's wallowing in it, isn't he?" He said, "He's the first American I've seen that's no bottom and all bottom."
So do you want to tell us how you got into swimming teaching? How your involvement with teaching started?
Well, I was quite a good swimmer. I mean, not boasting, but I was a good style swimmer. No speed, but I was a good. And then I joined the Royal Marines, and I did 12 years with them. And I used to. I swam for the Marines, a 6-mile race in the sea. And I came in out of the fleet, so I'm talking about 500 or 600. I come in about 20th, which was quite good, considering I did breaststroke all the way. I mean, an officer won it, but he was swimming front course. Well, you know, I had no chance against that. And a cousin of mine, I was working in Smithfield Market, and a cousin of mine who was a headmaster in Rochdale, we went to a wedding, as some do, and he come to me and said, "I'm surprised that you're working in the market, Artie, you know, with your swimming, you know." So what the hell has that got to, what swimming? Oh, he said, you can go teaching swimming. I said, I don't want to be a bath attendant. He said, no, it's nothing to do with bath attendants. He said, now they teach women from the education, and it's like a teacher's job. He said, and you, because I taught music, you see, I teach music. He said, you've got 2 subjects, you know. So I was interested, so I went and found out, and I went on the ASA course. I did the ASA course, teachers, and then of course, will you get news that you've passed before you can enter again, as you probably know. Then I took the advanced, you see, got me advanced to it. And the first job I applied for, I got. Mr. Porter was the head man then, a lovely gentleman, and Mrs. Barnes. And I got the job, and I got the job at Victoria.
That was your first swimming teaching job you wanted?
Yeah, and it was that all the time. I could have had Withington, but it's on my doorstep, you know. And not only that, I had the licence for Victoria, because I could teach the private.
Do you want to say something about, it was your father that got involved in the ASA after the war,
Yes.
is that right? Do you want to say something about how that came about? Or
Well, I think when they opened the Levenshulme Swimming Club, I think I think Sonny Lowry was very involved. Somebody called Jack Tonks and somebody called White, and they virtually each took over, as you do when you start these things. Each took over a job, and he just went on from there as representatives on various things, and eventually was president of. Well, there he is, president of the ASA.
there's a picture of him there.
Yes, for ASA for. He was, for a long number of years, he did an enormous amount with the timekeeping at the ASA trials and swimming, which were always, I think they were always held at the Derby Baths in Blackpool. And he always did it, he was always in charge of the timekeeping, but I don't know how long he was president, but he retired when he was 70. And he goes with the year, so that would be 1970 that he's dead now, but he retired I think in 1970.
From the ASA?
Yes, from that, yes.
And your father's name?
Fred Greaves.
Fred Greaves.
Spelled T-S.
Right, okay. We'll talk a bit about the dances.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yes. These were held in the first class, of course, and they used to cover the pools over with wood floor, nice dancing floor. You wouldn't have known there was a pool underneath. And of course the cubicles were sort of covered in. And the balcony, which is wrought iron along the top, they used to have flower baskets hanging from the top. I can't remember much about the band, where the band was. It must have been at one end of the bath. But we used to go to dances there, you know.
Yeah.
Nice.
How old were you when you first started going to the dances?
Dances. I must have been in early teens. Yes.
Can you remember any of the names of the bands you
No.
played?
No, can't. No.
Do you ever remember seeing the pool being boarded over?
Not actually seen it being done, no. It was always done, you know, when we went in.
It's quite hard to imagine what that would look like, actually.
Yes, it is. You wouldn't have known it was a...
No. Did the boards fit
Oh, yeah.
completely and there was no...
Yes, absolutely. Covered right over.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You wouldn't have known there was a pool there at
No.
all.
Did it feel strange dancing in the middle of it, knowing there was a
I don't
pool
think so.
underneath?
I don't think so.
That leads me on to say, do you remember the social events that they had at the Victoria Baths, at the High Street Baths? Because they would have dances there, wouldn't
The
they?
galas, do you mean? The swimming gala?
No, I'm thinking they used to floor over one of the
Oh, you
pools.
they could floor it over and have dances. I have been to the odd dance there.
Any particular times that you remember that? Any particular periods
No,
that you remember?
not now. I've only just got, you know, it closed and thought nothing, oh, it's going to be pulled down, and you forget all about it. And then, it's only after I've been in hospital, somebody said about Victoria Bath, I thought, oh, and I became interested. I think it's a shame if it can't be saved.
Yeah, no, we didn't have it.
This is a marvellous thing they've opened, isn't it? Yeah. There's new Bath.
The new pool. Yeah.
They've opened it, well,
But they're just opening it now.
they've been showing it on television.
Yeah, yeah.
And they got 2 Olympics on it.